Hello and welcome to the new Paul Bradbury podcast, looking at all things about Croatia. I'm delighted to welcome today a very interesting young man whose career has been really a timeline of independent Croatia. He first really appeared in the national media in 1991, having been called a complete idiot by the President Tudjman after he announced the fall of Vukovar. He's a Dubrovnik native, and he started the first ever PR company in Croatia just after the war. He's had an incredibly interesting and influential career throughout the last 30 years. And he's also very passionate about orchids and was actually the first YouTuber in Croatia, apparently. We'll find out about that. Kresmir Macan, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And
Thank you for invitation.
So we've known each other for almost 10 years now, I suppose, and we'll talk about that later. But I kind of like the idea of looking at what you've done in the last 30 years and looking at Croatia in the last 30 years. So let's go back to 19...
I've done better than Croatia.
I think that would probably be true, actually. Yeah. But let's go back to 91. You're from Dubrovnik. People come to Dubrovnik these days, mass tourism. It's a beautiful place. Back in 91, it was a very different situation. Tell us a little bit about that and the siege and so on.
So actually, I wasn't there at the time. I was already working at a press center in a foreign press bureau in Zagreb since I had to pass my exam. So life was business as usual. Already in September, it was normal. And when I finished my last exams, I simply joined to do the press guiding tours, kind of. I was tourist guide before in Dubrovnik, so speaking several languages, and when I volunteered what to do, they simply told me the best thing would be to go to the press center and help with the press. And that was the improvised press center, foreign press bureau, that was run interestingly by also other interesting people. It's Dada Lozančić, a current national security advisor of the president of Milanovic and former head of the intelligence services, was the head of it. So, and they did a great job through the next 5 years, still even through the war in Bosnia. And thing happens, I was with a sister here studying, and my parents and brother were in Dubrovnik, and all of a sudden, 1st of October, and there was first attacks and then soon siege, and you have no contacts. So actually you are on your own because no money can come. They probably were getting some salaries, but they didn't care about salaries at the time. So and I remember when I was I was informing. My father was one of the heads there of the defense or local administration defense, so not military but taking care of civilians. And so I was using him to get some information to send messages across, and we were that good that actually we managed to stay in touch with Dubrovnik all time. And I never had the opportunity to thank. I tried to thank those women, and there were women in switchboard in Split that could connect you through some existing lines, and you could phone home or any office. And though the telephone lines were officially cut, so transmitters weren't working, but there was some hard wire, something was working, and you were able, if you knew the code, you were able to get through like manual switchboard in the first times. And so we were getting info from Dubrovnik. I even managed later on to come with the Minister Salai through the night to Dubrovnik, but that was months later after the St. Nicholas Day. So actually Dubrovnik was besieged, and actually, as we see these days, there are still some intentions to credit some Croats from the past to be Serbian descendants, whatever. So Dubrovnik was that wishing part. They wanted that part of Dubrovnik history to become part of Serbian history. It's clean. Okay. What they wanted. That's the only crime Dubrovnik had, actually, that Dubrovnik was successful in those times when Serbia actually was under Turks.
Okay.
And unfortunately for them, at those times, either you were Muslim, so you had to take the Turkish culture, or you were nobody.
Yeah.
And Dubrovnik in the meantime flourished, and so I think that was the main intention of. And it's not the first time it happened. Also at the beginning, actually, when Napoleon fell in 1815, when the Russians and Montenegrins robbed everything around Dubrovnik and came close to Dubrovnik. So it was kind of repeating of the history. It's very hard to believe that you can, now we see Gaza and now see other stuff, that you have a modern city, flourishing, and then all of a sudden 3 months without water and electricity. and that even if you dare to wash your clothes in the sea, then you're exposed to eventually some shells, or you could be killed. So it was hard, but they managed. So we kept in touch, and well, we were actually I probably thought once what's going to happen if they enter the city. That would be carnage. But because they knew who they would, they were not taking many prisoners, and if they were prominent people, so that was they had a list of people they wanted to get. Same as in Vukovar or whatever. So it was hard to watch, and we were. But I was fighting the other way. So we were able to get the first TV crew through the press center to Dubrovnik. And then first images came out of Dubrovnik and international, worldwide. And then because one of the first things that they killed transmitters, so you couldn't transmit. And even something went wrong, or probably it was disabled, but even cameras went wrong or broken in Dubrovnik. So you could even not film for later.
Okay. So what was the international reaction when those images came out? Because I mean, tourists today, they go to Dubrovnik and they go, it's amazing. And when you say 30 years ago, this is what was happening,
they cannot believe.
It's impossible to believe. Yeah.
No, they cannot believe till they still see those pictures of they had the guided missiles, so they were going to the walls of the old city. So, and when it was shot, actually every picture that was coming out of Dubrovnik was changing the public opinion. But you have to remember, at those times we had only televisions. The internet wasn't a big player. It's much easier now with whatever's happening in Ukraine or Gaza. Pictures come immediately. Or
TikTok and everything else.
So we had to physically get the pictures out of Dubrovnik. And I remember we did the first screening in an esplanade to show it to everybody that this is really happening. Because when the city is besieged and then it's war propaganda, nobody believes you that you are besieged. So it was in the same time information war and real war. And after nobody actually believed that 6th of December carnage, or let's say what would be exact word when you burn houses. They didn't kill so many people, but they actually killed the city. They killed the old city. They burned 6 or 7 palaces in the old city, and made of stone. So they used phosphorus and on the UNESCO Monument of Culture. And I think that was the tipping point. And they nearly came close to the city, but the city defended itself. The fortress up there on that day was empty, actually, or day before. It was empty for a while, nobody there. But they didn't know it, so they didn't take it. So at the end, Sveti Vlahovi would always say, saved the city. And the pictures that were devastating for the Yugoslav army and Serbs came out. So you've seen a lot of black smoke from the city, burning houses, and I think they nailed the image of them as aggressors on Dubrovnik, and forced sort of French foreign minister tried to come, whatever. They realized that they won't be able to take it militarily. And then they tried some games, but fortunately for us, it didn't work. And then the city was liberated in May. In May next year. Okay, we'll come back to that period. But as a Dubrovnik native, obviously that was a very dark period in Dubrovnik's history. In the next 30 years, it's gone on phenomenal change. What's your opinion or your views on how things changed after the war, tourism starting again, and then really escalating and stuff? How does it feel how do you view the whole thing? Let's say for 10 years it was like nothing. You had to rebuild the houses and so on. But Dubrovnik was the first liberated of the Croatian cities. So it started from 92. So by 2000 it was already settled. But then when the tourism started, then the demand for the houses, for real estate in the old city started, and it's not anymore the old city where I used to live. So I'm born in Zagreb, but I raised in Dubrovnik and grew up in the old city itself. And we still have the house in the old city. And for me, it was a huge city at the time. For a kid, can you imagine that this 300 by 400, whatever it's Dubrovnik, is not huge when you know the numbers. But in my childhood, I didn't go to some parts of the city, old city, even until later, or even you discovered some parts.
I think I introduced you to a restaurant.
Above 5.
Above 5.
So some things I haven't seen myself, though I was living there. So you would keep like your quarter, you would move. So it was a whole world for us. And with the tourists and with the foreigners buying apartments and houses and people moving out, I think that the old city lost the soul. So that's the biggest issue is only 1,000 people living in there. Then there is over tourism, and it's not always good tourism. So if you have a million visitors, whatever, as it used to be by cruisers that were simply drinking water or going to toilets, and visiting, of course, the monuments. But there was not much left to the city itself. Actually, state was getting some money. It's funny also that distribution of the funds. So the cruiser comes in and then state gets the fee, not the city. That's the reason why they came for. I think that one of the greatest thing is that Dubrovnik had that NGO protecting the city walls. Actually, the walls were maintained, and everything after the war was quickly repaired because they had and people and money, and this is a good thing. But now, what's Dubrovnik in let's say from November to March? That city. So it's hard to expect the whole season there with all these big numbers, because I can understand also the people doing that over tourism. They cannot run it all the time. So Dubrovnik is very dependent on the planes, and if there are no planes, there is no tourism. And then if there is no offer, why would planes come there? So it's quite a complex thing with Dubrovnik. I think what actual Mayor Frankovic is doing is okay, trying to reduce number of tourists in Dubrovnik, trying to keep people living in Dubrovnik, because otherwise we would finish as Sveti Stefan. I was always, as a kid, as a young guide, I enjoyed the Montenegro tours, and since Steven was Sveti Stefan, it was like perfect place, perfect peninsula island. But now it's a hotel. Everything around it is, built up. It doesn't look nice as it used to be. And that, when there are no people in the city, there's no soul of it. You can get a hotel. So I was joking, like the Americans early in the 70s when they were coming, they thought that it was Disneyland, because it looked like a castle. Because actually, all Disneylands are made up after German castles.
And this is before Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it was before Game of Thrones. So they were asking, when do you close the castle? What's working hours? But I think, unfortunately, we could turn to Dubrovnik land, the Disneyland, whatever, in Dubrovnik, if people leave the city and if there is nobody living anymore, because it's hard. All prices are for foreigners. There are some, retailers for food. Before, I remember that you were able to buy everything in the city before. Now it's just a souvenir and more or less all the same. And you cannot buy anything in the city. I understand that now why, but you cannot remember that you won't believe now that there were like 3 or 4 shoe stores. There was umbrella repairmen in Dubrovnik, in the old city.
There was an incredible map. I was doing a comparison between Trogir and Dubrovnik, and they had this map of artisans in the old town of Dubrovnik, and there were like 50 or 60 all over the place. And then, Trogir still has, like a shoemaker and a suit maker and everything else. And now there's nothing in Dubrovnik.
Nothing.
I don't know if is the last barber still there, the guy?
There is a barber, and there are a few goldsmiths that are still there, that are original ones. That's it, I think.
But it was incredible in like 50 years how things have changed.
It's incredible. And it's different life essence. So actually, what do you have there? Unless they had a school, the city hall, whatever. The question whether would people be coming to the city at all.
What was your favorite year, or favorite sort of era of Dubrovnik? Obviously it's changed completely from the war to where we are today.
Which one I remember are those pre-war, 89. So 89, probably the best season. Right. And I was young tourist guide, so I really enjoyed it. And it was well organized. We were living our way of life, and people were just coming, adoring Dubrovnik, and it was, they appreciate it. I think that they appreciate it much more. People would come there for 7 days and then stay. Now it's whatever, it's 3 days stay. So it's a lot of quickly moving through the city just to see not Game of Thrones. They make ticks and whatever, and then go next. They cannot appreciate it much. And honestly, I think that we don't even mind offering them more to stay. So this is why I'm on Lopo. That is great, and where you can move from the city in the summer. But Dubrovnik itself, it's really a question of what do you do after 3 days. So it's also a challenge for local tourist community to organize more of the things for people to stay in and around Dubrovnik.
Well, I think like you go to Lopud a lot. The Elefiti Islands are fantastic. There's a lot of stuff around Dubrovnik, but there isn't really that connection between this is the city and then and people don't really put this plus this, and if you put this plus this,
then you get something. You have Mlet, that is additional 1 day trip to the national park of Mlet, that is very convenient to come from Dubrovnik by speedboat. So there could be things, but we somehow I still think that we are just moving as it goes. So this year could be a tipping point with the prices, limits, numbers going down. Dubrovnik has less tourists, I think, than last year.
Right.
Not even compared to the 19, of course, but I think even less than the last year.
Okay.
So I might be wrong, but it's less. So it's not record-breaking season for Dubrovnik. Okay, because they decided we want something else.
Okay.
So less numbers and let's say much of the quality would be better for Dubrovnik.
Okay. Let's go back to 91. Vukovar. You were working in the press. In the press. Tell us about the job you had, and tell us about.
So from the Foreign Press Bureau, and after a month or two, I was actually 2 months probably. I was moved to, or even a month. I was moved to the Ministry of Information, War Ministry of Information. You simply had to do something like that, and because we were fighting propaganda war with the Belgrade and all the other agencies they had. And I was chief of staff of the minister, because I had that experience from the ground, how to work with the press. So both of us, we were in charge of taking care of the foreigners and explaining the Croatian story and publicizing as many as we can of the news, pictures, whatever we had from Croatia. So you have to understand it's much more difficult now, because now you take a picture, you send you on any messaging application, it goes over. And there was no way to send a picture a long distance but email, or it was scarce, and some kind of teleprinters, telephoto machines, whatever. So it's you couldn't distribute pictures widely, so you had to be to think of things, how to send, what to publish, what to print, and how to distribute and do whatever you do. So on the day when the Vukovar was about to fall, so I was kind of outside body in the state administration. So the state administration was always slow. And I was, still connected with my people from the foreign press. So actually they called me and said, the commander is out. And I remember it was Sunday morning. I never checked. I was always looking at those dates. But, with the years, you think you'll always remember. But somehow in my memory, it's this morning. And it was not normal, usual working day. And so I said to the minister, my uncle passed away this year, and said, go to the prime minister, to Gregoric. They probably know, but go there and see, because we were just across, and see what we'll do. And because this is the news, so the Mladi Jastreb, both of the commanders are still alive, but the younger one, he was out. He was the last one who stayed in Vukovar. So if he were in Vinkovci, that means thing is over. And the minister wasn't coming. They were, deciding whatever. And there was the first lesson of the crisis communication that I'm teaching now. But at the time, I felt it wasn't right. That press. There was one journalist. It was he's also deceased now. Goran Djakovic was a stinger for Reuters. So he was just trying to pick some news somewhere. But he was sitting in my room, so he was listening to my calls. And then I realized it's not appropriate that he listens to my calls. So I sent him away. But he came back as a good journalist. He came back, and so after a while, his boss, Reuters correspondent, because in those times, Reuters correspondents were kings. Yeah, right. Because they were able to send the news. They had technique, whatever, and if they broadcast something, whole world knows. And this is what I learned. I used it quite well later. So I kept good relationship with him, and Mark something else, and I remember, and. He said to me, I know something's going on, so you have to tell me. And simply when you do the proper, so I'm electrical engineer, so I finished 2 years of the university, but I was tourist guide, and my system of values was that I would never go and deliberately lie. I wouldn't say, as they said, these are the rules, but I knew it somehow by my formation. So I didn't want to lie to him. I said, I cannot tell you, and I know it's going on. Oh, okay. Then I said, Vukovar was divided in two and militarily, and it's very unlikely that we can defend it military way. So I didn't say Vukovar has fallen, because I wasn't authorized to do it, but I hinted that it's a question of days, hours. And at those times, the teletexts were very big letters. And teletext is something that is still used in Croatia, still very popular. Not in many countries, but teletext was very popular in Croatia, and it still is for betting now. But before it was for news, and so they couldn't put much words in that teletext. So they simply said, I remember that actually sounded like that. They probably put some more words, but it was Vukovar has fallen, Macan confirmed.
Right.
And then it was on Slovenian teletext. A lot of Vukovar refugees were in Slovenia. They started calling me because I was in touch with them all the time. Said, "Is it true?" And we confirmed, because they are all frustrated because they have relatives, people that they know what's going to happen to them. And I think the minister came late in the evening and said, "You're not supposed to say everything you know." And I said, "I didn't. I just said a part." But the Vesnaška Rožbot usually mentions that when the news broke out to the president, and she came because she was a PR of the president, she came to Tudjman and said, "We have to do something. Word is out, Vukovar has fallen, and Ministry of Information has confirmed." And said, "Who?" And he asked, "Who's the idiot?" And that was me. So that's the anecdote that Vesna knows if it's true or not, but she's keep repeating it all the time.
Okay.
But rule number one, if you tell the truth, you survive. So I was still there in the ministry. I kept my job. Nothing happened because I didn't do anything wrong. It was just a lot of panic. I didn't say everything that I knew.
How much pressure did you? Because obviously, information is king, and we don't have the internet and everything else. How much pressure were you on to script the story and everything else, and in terms of what you gave out in information?
You simply follow your guts. So I think it's always in your life you follow your guts, and that's why I say everything comes from your guts. Because if you feel it right, we knew that something bigger was happening, and that question is, I'm still wondering whether releasing it early saved some lives or didn't help. But I think that releasing it early made everybody move to Vukovar, foreign Red Cross and everybody. Cyrus Vance was the day after there. So simply when Reuters said something is happening, then all the international organization moved there. So I hope some lives were saved, then instead of being lost. And so I was quite peaceful about it, because there was no bad intention on it. So you simply follow it had to happen. I sent the guy out, he came back. Because it's snowing. So he came back, and so it's it probably should have happened that way.
Sure. So in 2019, you took me to Vukovar for November the 18th. You were with the Dubrovački trombonieri. You were marching as with your guys, and it was an incredibly powerful. It's an incredibly powerful day. Mm-hmm. How do you feel, having been really there at the forefront of all the information back then, and you see Vukovar today? How do you feel?
But I felt even more by watching that Vukovar veterans documentary on these guys who were defending it. And this is what I told you, that when you see the HOS, after watching the documentary on HOS guys, and they turn out to be like most center guys when you talk about Vukovar. So though they were members of the HOS and under these Zadon Spremni flags, when you hear them, they are first to say, Zadon Spremni was the wartime, but now it should be stopped with that. And so when you hear and see what they went through. So I had all the information on Mladi Jastreb going out, but when I saw destroyed headquarters, then I finally, after many years, I realized that was intentional retreat. So they already knew they cannot do it. They destroyed all the communication, everything they had in bunkers. So you when you get kind of full picture, but you never get it full. Only people that were inside. Vukovar is getting back that position they deserve, but there are always pluses and minuses in those position. Everybody else puts lots of money, invests lots of money to Vukovar. Probably Dubrovnik, Vukovar was rebuilt perfectly, nearly perfect. But I think the soul is lost, is gone. Because they say they said it's multicultural, and I didn't know, but if it's true, but they were telling me that was why it was so vibrant, because it was the center of the booze smuggling in former Yugoslavia. So they were, everybody, doing something with the alcohol was going through the Vukovar. So there were some very strong economic connections, and then that's why it was vibrant. So now it's, but again, I think Dubrovnik has one side of the problem because of the mass tourism. So it's losing its soul because of the money, everything. So the Dubrovnik people have more money than ever, so it's also killing the soul. In Vukovar, that I think they tried to rebuild it, but since at the same time the war, there was 4 years of occupation, then a peaceful transition. So they were latest out of it, and then I think
and it was never reconquered, was it? It was kind of given back. So
yeah, but it was given peacefully, but destroyed in the meantime. So they were delayed compared to the rest of Croatia, while the rest of Croatia was already, doing things normal. Or there was a privatization here. There were some companies were getting as normal. Some were destroyed. I think everything in Vukovar fell down. So it's hard to rebuild it fully. Nobody will invest in any industry or whatever. So and most of the, unfortunately, people use those tax advances. So you would see very expensive cars with the VU registration plate, and I think that wasn't the idea. Yeah. So I think the state did as much as they could administration-wise. Though some of the biggest companies actually, due to those tax deductions, they are coming on Vukovar. PPD is now the number one company, or probably one among the strongest in Croatia. It came out of Vukovar, and the headquarters still, I think, in Vukovar because of these. So the state tried to do it, but as since there was, I think also the thing, as you said, there, and if everything else, Knin was conquered, so Serbs fled. And some returned, not many. Croatia opened later. But in Vukovar, they all stayed. Yeah. And they know each other, who was where. And okay, it's changing with the time, but I think it also blocked the life in the city. Yeah. Because it was a great move by Tudjman, but amnesty and everything. But again, people cannot forget the crimes and who was on the other side, whatever. So you have they still have a situation where there is a policeman who is in Yugoslav army now, in Serbian army. So of course that some Croats from Vukovar won't trust him. So it's slowly rebuilding, but since it's very slow, I think that they lost that economy and the economy power. And on the other side, they ended at the end of the country. Mm-hmm. So they are actually end of Europe. Yep. If you say Vukovar is now at the end of Europe, literally. Yeah. So there are barriers, there's Schengen, there is everything now. So everything should be going for Vukovar somewhere, but it's not as it is easy. Yeah. Yeah. So I think also some kind of isolation there. You go there for the 18th and then the rest of the year.
It's a one-day destination.
It's a one-day destination, but it has still to be remembered. I think that you were also surprised what you saw there, because people get and I think everybody involved in politics should go there and see what are realities of life.
I mean, I've been twice. I went to 2019 with you, and that was the first time I did the whole procession, and I was really shocked by everything. And then I went again in 2021. Which was the 30th anniversary. And so there were lots and lots of people. And I spent most of my time with local people in Vukovar. And it was stark to me how much it was almost a celebration. It was a chance of, people coming together and remembering. And of course, there's the sadness and everything else. But it seemed to me that as time goes by,
they're celebrating life.
They're celebrating life, yeah. And we went to the cemetery, for the service at the end, and I was struck by how many more people were taking selfies than actually spending time at the graves. And there's nothing wrong with that. People are generally coming together and they're remembering this tough time. They're remembering the people, and so it's a really, really unusual event, really, and I'm really, really glad that I've been there and I've done it, and I'll go again every year when I can do, because you can see it's appreciated by the people there. And but I really wish people would go other times of the year, which I try and go.
But it's I've never been out of the once, I think, out of the festivities, and but it's hard because it's there were people still are divided there. We still, we are always mentioning that case that Norwegians gave a grant for a school where, under condition that Serb kids and Croatian kids go together in that school. So they're asking for money back because it didn't work out. It didn't work out after 30 years. Yeah. So there is that division. Yeah. The economy is not that strong, and after so many crises, definitely in economy in Slavonia is bad. Yeah. And so they were devastated by war and also by post-war developments.
Sure. 95 victory. How did you? I mean, obviously you're overjoyed at Croatia getting the victory and independence, everything else. What were your hopes for Croatia then? And you saw a very bright future, I suppose. And how's it worked out?
But business as usual, or life as usual. This is what you expected. I ended up doing the Oluja thing again as head of the press center, organizing. So I met some of the journalists from 91 coming to cover it. I said, hello, do you remember me? And then though Croatia was kind of developed in a war, in a whatever aspect, they still didn't think of where they would put the journalist if the storm starts.
Right.
So I simply said, 24 hours before Mate, I said to my minister, I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we should, locate them somewhere, because if everything would be blocked, nobody was talking an exact date, what's going to happen, but it was clear something's going on. And so I said, if there is an action, where are we going to put the journalists? So we improvised. We put them back to Westin, Intercontinental at the time, and we kept them there entertained them for 2 days, because you had to entertain them because everything was blocked. The Russians could try to go to, there was 1 or 2 crews, they got killed. So actually the combat zones were closed. But it ended quickly, and after that I decided to go private. So I was in the government, and I decided to go private and to do business as usual as much as I can. And Croatia moved that way.
Yeah.
So when there was a prospect that East Vukovar would be sold peacefully, and I think most rest of Croatia moved forward.
Yeah.
But it was very slow, because it was. But I would say again, it were kind of better times than today, because nobody's, for example, mentioning that. But most of the houses destroyed in the war were faster repaired and rebuilt than after the earthquake here.
Yeah.
Including Dubrovnik. So Dubrovnik was rebuilt, everything around Dubrovnik, all the houses, in some years. 1-2 years, so and very affordable price, and there was no. So there were some huge successes, and that energy of having the country was. Having to build a new country was quite strong, and then I think that declined by the end of the 90s. When there was a kind of isolation for Croatia, all these troubles, and Tudjman being weaker and weaker. And
so you really felt, so 95, obviously a lot of optimism in Croatia.
Yes, a lot of optimism, but it declined by 99.
By 99 it was gone.
By 99. So at the time, that's when they asked me to join Croatian radio television. So I started my agency, and I worked in the agency for 1 year in 97 till 98, December 98. And they asked me, should I transfer to television just to help? Because they needed I was always considered like liberal. So they needed somebody who would be in the middle, and television was under a lot of pressure, because even Montgomery, who was the American ambassador later on in Belgrade, he had a kind of task to soften it. And so there was under a lot of pressure. So I was balancing all that as a PR person there, not as something else. But, I was the first face of the television, apart from the host. And so this was the first time when I was coming out, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. There were, let's say, hardliners in ages that Tudjman is getting weaker. The opposition wasn't united, the same as it is today. So the one thing that hasn't changed was that. And then Tudjman died at the end of the year, and elections were coming. So we had the second of January elections. Yeah,
right.
Was that famous government, or second or third? What was at the first days of the new year, and it was actually the result of Montgomery and all the others putting the coalition of the opposition together, and then winning over Tudjman. But it was like in 2011, AGZ was weak after 10 years of power, and Tudjman was gone, and there was no leadership on that side who could take over properly. So there was a new government, and it was a shock for many. And I even it was a shock for Racan and Budiša, who won the elections. But they started doing it, and since I stayed at the television with Mirko Galić, and I've seen things developing, but not being good in promoting it.
Okay.
And this is how I ended up in government, and at the beginning, in the middle of 2003, before the end of the term, and I moved from television because I've seen them trying to starting building the highways, and they never ask anything because they were complete opposite of what it used to be before. They didn't use television for as much promotion they could. And so they asked me one day, how can we promote highways? I said, go take the cameras and show it. And that's what we did, actually. And I'm very grateful for that, because I was able to see them. This is the only way when you drive under the highway on the construction roads, and after you never drive that through that way. And we did that with the Prime Minister Racan, with the President Mesic, and so they were very interesting times. And so it was, let's say, from one extreme you went to another. And though the others were saying, the agencies were saying no, they are also controlling. So I've said every time the left came, they were to the power in Croatia. They were not ready, but actually they did everything what a normal conservative government would do, like closing companies, firing people. Because I think Kolinic closed in one point like 500,000 working places in unsolvent companies. They simply said they're dead, and we have to admit they're dead. So I think that was a mistake of Tudjman after the '95, that they were not doing the proper privatization, proper closing the companies that were not functional, and creating chances for something new. And this happened under in those period of the Racan's government. So kind of Croatia started, the private sector started to flourish, because they simply saw the chance. Nobody asked them anything, whatever to do. And this is actually where we got very close to the EU. We got invitations, so we had the longest path to EU. But in 2003, we had that invitation. I think Tovina was arrested. No, later. That happened later on. But we were invited, and then we had problems because of Gotovina later on, The Hague. But at the time we got invitation, I remember, because I did elections in Macedonia later on as advisor, 2008. So they were at the same. So Macedonia was at the same position as us, 2003. So and they're still not in.
And they're still not in. So
they were having invitation at the same level as we did. So they had their own troubles, wars, everything, but we moved on. So I think that was the key contribution of the government, was that invitation to and raising up the standards, because when Sanader came, Sanader had to be European, and most of his campaign was I'm acceptable right party leader.
The acceptable face of the right.
Acceptable face of the right in Croatia, and this actually helped him win the elections. Opposition wasn't that much united, and it was cold. So, and then you have huge, I would say, that push that happened with the left government continued. Highways were finished, but we never were really thinking long term. So when the highways were built, then all the industry was involved there. They a lot of companies, but all of a sudden there were no more highways to build. So the company went bankrupt or whatever.
Dubrovnik.
What, the Dubrovnik highway? But it's going to be now. It's finally. I think that this what they are going to be built. It's okay now with the bridge, and that if they finish that part from Metkovic till the bridge, then that's it. And then fast road to Dubrovnik, or highway to Osijek, and then actually Dubrovnik has a big problem with a fast road to airport, because if everything happens on that road, there is two ways. Then
I mean, Dubrovnik's got one road coming in, one road going out
to the airport. That's why it was also hard to conquer it. Because there is no highway to Dubrovnik. Dubrovnik is quite well protected, and this is why Dubrovnik is situated there where it is, because it's quite well protected. And so I think that Croatia was going steadily till that. I think that 2007 was like when they say we have that saying "Kad je Isus hodo zemljom," when Jesus walked the earth, everything was fine. So I think there was money, there was everything. It was. I remember 2000. So if you ask for years, 2007 was probably the best ever.
It was a good year.
And then the crisis came, the housing and everything, and we never got out of the crisis. And then that's when Milanovic came to power and actually didn't do much to get us out of the crisis.
There was a lot of hope when he came in, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a lot of hope, but no delivery. So actually, he came in 111. We went out of the crisis 2015 by numbers, and it was one of the longest recession in Europe. So I think this is where we didn't do right. We needed better leadership at the time, and somehow strange when you look at those days when there were 100 or 200,000 unemployed, and there was a question. There was a big problem in Croatia compared to today when you cannot find somebody to work. So in Croatia, so we came in in less than 13 years from one extreme to another, and this is then due to the EU. So actually, we have to be honest. The Sanader finished most, and Kosor, both of them. Kosor is people are very wrong when they talk about Jadranka Kosor as somebody who didn't contribute on that European way. She was the one who got the date. Because without her going around taking care of Slovenian president, prime minister, whatever. But she did it. And she was decided to get the date. She got us the date because Milanovic at the end he only was the prime minister when it happened, but it was already decided by the previous government. So it is kind of heritage of Racan first, then Sanader and Kosor. But it took us long. It took us too long because of all our problem, including the justice system that we still don't have it good. We pushed it to reform it to get to the EU, but after we entered the EU, I think everything get back to usual business.
So. Like you went into the war like a tour guide almost, and you came out of it as a very accomplished press person with a lot. You picked up a lot of skills, and then you decided to start. I think it was the first ever PR agency
in '97. Some among the first. When out of those that are newer, I'm the eldest. Though there were PR agencies before in Croatia.
So how was that to get started? Who were your clients? How was it received? Did people understand what a PR agency was?
No, they didn't know. So when neighbors at the time were asking me what's odnos s javnošću, what does it mean? And I also discovered the term some years ago. So when I was in the wartime, I didn't know that was public relations. Or media relations, whatever. And then I had that IT background. I finished university. I was interesting detail. I was selling Pampers for 6 months.
You were selling Pampers?
Pampers for P&G.
Okay.
But I was selected among hundreds of people. We passed the test, and they were giving great salary and car. For 24 hours. So I needed a car, so that's why I accepted the job. So I get to know Zagreb, then I moved to the IT business, but IT media business. So I was cooperating a lot with the IT media. The first internet magazine, Net, with Rakar was at the time, and then I was. Then I actually worked for some people, but I realized that I could do it better. So I think it's alone. So it's usually when you work in a system, you see that have more knowledge or more ideas than the system itself. Then you decide to start alone. And I was actually primarily working with the IT agencies at the time. So just providing advertising, events. So I got the first award for. At the time, it was big IT fair in Zagreb Info in '97. We got best prize for presence because a lot of my ideas. For example, we printed advertising on nylon bags.
Okay.
So everybody walking through the fair, that was big at the time because, as I said, there was no much internet. So the fairs were still big. So everybody was walking with our, and that was cheap and stuff like that. So we got the award for that. It was my first award. But so I was in the IT and I was doing well. So I remember when I was negotiating television, I was telling them that I make around, and this is still for today's situations, good salary. I was making about 11,000 kuna. So it's 1,400 euros in my company. I was only employed, and I was the only one employed, and it was okay for the first year. So it worked out well. And average salary probably was 2,500 kuna, so 300 euros at the time. So it was great salary at the time. And unfortunately, we haven't changed. The average salary moved quite high, but the upper salaries are still there where they are. But it's good. The salary is finally up. So I was doing that when they called me from the television, and they simply offered me more money, and I simply said yes.
Okay, right.
And it was offer I couldn't refuse, and it was my media business. It was media business. So obviously I'm destined somehow to do the media business. When I was talking to myself and asking what I do, this is media and politics. This is definitely what where I swim naturally.
Okay. And you're the first YouTuber in Croatia?
But this is how my sister, my daughter Eva called me when she saw my presentation, because in 2006 when I was working for other PR agency, and I had my agency all the time operating, but if I had better conditions, I worked with somebody else. I was working some side things, I had a partner that he was working in Manjgura, and in 2006 was. And it didn't start as a political thing. It was motivated. We had a big takeover of Pliva, and it was proxy fight. So there was a Icelandic activist. So there was a time when Iceland was on top of the world.
Oh yeah, before the banking crisis.
Yeah, but this is these are. So I'm saying this is 2007. A lot of money all over.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it was 2006, and activists tried to buy Pliva. AGZ wanted to sell it to American Bar. And we were hired as professional consultants to activists. And we couldn't break through any stories because AGZ decided that it would be bar, and they closed pretty much a lot of media. And so that was that. Let's say there is a big change from those times, and today the media free completely now. So you cannot. You can push it there, push me, pull it, but there is no such strict control as, for example, Senator had. And I wouldn't say it was really censorship, but simply he was giving money and they were playing as the boss, the tunes, the boss order. So we couldn't break through. And then I was always known for making some guerrillas. And we discovered actually that Senator was on a secret meeting, and it was like in the movies. I got from other advisors, they simply brought me a document with cut out pieces like in the movies. So the pieces you are supposed to know, and so the information was Senator was at the dinner with the other people from Pliva or surrounding Pliva, including general manager of Pliva, in some villa in Verona, and cover was he was attending the Verona opera because he was very fancy, and we realized that it's cover, and we confirmed it, and the news broke. I was the one who broke the news, and we organized it quite well and fair with Index, and Index is one of the things that influenced a lot of development of democracy and media in Croatia. So it was the only media where we could publish something like that, and we published. It was a true story, and then we didn't know how to keep the story alive. And then we realized that if Senator was privately there, and because they said it's not official visit, somebody had to pay for the room. So it's always that conflict of interest law that is actually killing politicians in Croatia. Because we said the law says 70 euros maximum for the. So did you pay the room? Where is the invoice? So we asked like two weeks for invoice, and they couldn't produce it till somebody flew there and got the invoice back.
Right.
Because we knew that mindset would be, you have to pay us, So they didn't pay the room. And they didn't ask for a bill. Somebody else could pay, but they could have asked the bill in the name. They didn't. So to try to make it, those were creative times. Now are quite boring times. So to try to make the story live longer, we made a song. It's Balašević, Računajte na nas, and we remade it to Računčiće kod nas.
Okay.
Yeah, because saying, do you have a bill? And I thought that all the media would air it. No, the opposition radios, they aired it once or twice, and because Balašević, and it was like a flop. But I realized then somebody made pictures to music and put it on YouTube. Haram Basha 22, and he got 30,000 views.
Wow!
And I said, oh, this could be it. So we experimented with it, and I opened the channel, And after learning this experience, so somebody else did it at the time, but after learning that experience, we said this could be a channel, new, and you have to know YouTube opened with the first YouTube video from the zoo in 2006.
Yeah.
So it was roughly. So Croatia is quite good in taking all the new technology. You know it with the social networks, whatever it is, because we have nothing. Or we are not like Austrians or Germans that have all the systems that they want to keep maintain. We go from the scratch, and we usually build it with the newest technology. Actually, the first video flop. It was actually Milanovic as a spokesman of SDP against Maciek, the spokesman of government and NHZ, and he was lying like a Maciek title, but it didn't work out. Some thousand, not more. And then Zrinka Baric, colleague of us, watched the Otvoreno with the Minister of Interior, Kirin, who was talking some rubbish. He was answering to Bago, the journalist, when he asked him, the journalist Bago asked him, do you know how the organized crime is strong in Croatia? And his Minister of Police, he said, no, why should I know? Do you know how it's organized? So we were, whoever watched it and knowing this, we were shocked because so many affairs going on. And he was giving very stupid answers. And she made an edit of it with the most stupid answers and music of Don Corleone, The Godfather. It nearly got million hits.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, initially probably 200, 300,000, but with the time it got 940, nearly million hits, and altogether the channel had 10 million views later on. So in 2006, if you had even 200, I remember we used to have like launch of videos for 130,000. It's even today's numbers is good when you have 30,000 in one day. Yeah. So we used to have that, but now it's millions. People can get millions in a day because you have an audience there. Yeah. But can you imagine in this country
it just wasn't known,
Yeah, but in this country you had enough tech-savvy people who were using mail, whatever. It was mail initially that we used to distribute those things. And it exploded. So actually, the guys from YouTube called the proxy and said, this is a hit. Can you translate? And then the guy translated. And the YouTube guy said, because they had a switchboard in headquarters, they see this is a hit. But this is stupid. Doesn't make sense. And a proxy answer, but that's why they watch it. Doesn't make sense.
Right.
And then we remember we had another big hit when it was campaign 2007. So it didn't start as political, but actually there was the first satire of politicians in Croatia. I made most of the videos, not that one that was most popular. I remember when we had that like sarcastic video of SDP also being ran, like making fun of the other HZ video. They called from YouTube and asked, what is this old lady in Russian talking? So actually we were, out of the blue, just, 2006, US, some startup called YouTube, not the Google YouTube today. It's some startup YouTube and they see their dashboard, everything saying something is Croatia, where is Croatia is the first thing. So it was that, but when you do things first, then you don't realize that you are doing something that nobody has ever done because there was no platform like that before. So it's my daughter who years later realized that.
Yeah. Well, talking about doing things first, over the 10 years I've known you, the time I thought you were the biggest asshole was during the Corona crisis when we did that Viber community together. But that was an incredible bit of visionary from you. Do you want to just tell people a little bit about that, the background and what you saw and how it worked?
This was your fault. It's not me. We were just whining. Unless you were whining, I wouldn't do anything because I wasn't that. I was okay with what I was doing. I was trying to kill as much as possible of the fake news. Mm-hmm. It was fun, because there were hundreds of thousands of them. So it kept me busy and business was okay. So from that side, I had enough time. And then you came up whining, saying, why don't they do Viber community for tourists that was the second phase. First thing he said, why don't they say that Croatia is open? Because this is great, Croatia is open first, and nobody knows that Croatia is open. I say, I know. And we explained why, we were EU presidency at the time, but they were not, doing it properly. And so nobody knew how to enter Croatia properly, but people want to come. So you said, I didn't know how to help you. I said, I'll take you in a car, in a Porsche, and I'll take you to the border. And then we really collected the first information that Croatia is open. We collected all the data documents from the police. They welcome us, and also it was funny. You remember the guy who wanted to go for lunch with
his mistress,
Slovenian guy. He didn't get over.
Yeah.
That was not appropriate business reason.
Just to explain, at the time, things were not very clear. But if you wanted to come into Croatia, this was May of 2020. You could come in if you had a confirmed and paid for booking. And so they were actually stopping. The two Slovenian ladies were stopped at the border because they were asked, "Where are you going to?" And they were like, "Maybe Krk, maybe Crikvenec, I don't know." And they were refused because they didn't have any
business reason.
Any business reason. And so that was the level of confusion there was. And then there was this Slovenian guy who lived in that village in Bregana, who used to come and see his mistress every weekend in Croatia for lunch and a bit of fun. But he was also refused entry because he didn't have a business reason.
Okay, business reason was appropriate. Business reason was a tourist reservation, so they simply had to book it, and they would be allowed to come. And they, or you had to have just a mail. We remember the guys who had just a mail. We have a meeting at 12:30 in Zagreb.
Lots of meetings.
Yes, and they let them go.
That's right, yeah.
They let them go. So we witnessed all that firsthand. And then on our way back, you asked why doesn't the government do the Viber community like they did for Corona? I said, ask them, and I'll ask. But you ask them, you're a journalist. So I asked my colleagues doing that, and they simply said, we are too busy with this, we cannot even run tourism. And then you were again whining. They should have done something. Because actually you had more troubles than I did, because you were out of business.
Mm.
Yeah, because if there is no tourism, there is no business for total Croatia. So I wasn't that much into feeling the problem.
And I was getting so many messages, emails saying,
but you were not doing anything else than answering that was the initial. You were answering the people because people knew there was total Croatia news, and they were asking you advice and everything. And actually, you didn't have any. You were helping people, volunteers, but alone you couldn't do it. And that's why you were actually telling me, get me somebody to take over this from me. And then when you said about Viber, I remember that I said, okay, they won't do it. Come Tuesday to my office and we'll do it. And we did it at Viber community with some volunteers, the interns that I had in the office. All youngsters, you remember it.
I remember I was, because I'm such a technical idiot that I had to get one of the interns to actually download Viber for desktop for me. Because I didn't know how to do that.
You didn't know what Viber was by that morning. And especially Viber community. And people always asking why the Viber community, because in 2000 that was the only community available. All the others had groups. And community was allowing much easier access of people. And one of the great features was that translation. You remember when we discovered it, that's again at the interns. When they were talking to Hungarians, and when I asked them, how do you talk to Hungarians? Oh, boss, it's easy. You press the message, it translates to Croatian. I'll say, okay, let's try. We tried, it worked.
It was, so I went from, I think, after 5 hours of downloading Viber for my desktop to answering Hungarian border questions.
Yes.
It
was fun time. And then we exploded, and I think traffic to the total Croatia exploded, and we had great partners in Ministry of Interior. We worked with them. Good, Actually, they were Ministry of Tourism at the time. Yeah. And unfortunately, Minister of Tourism, not Minister of Tourism, but Croatian Tourist Board was our greatest, not ally, not to say anything else.
No comment.
No comment. So, and there were a lot of misunderstandings because they couldn't understand that somebody can do their job and not ask anything. Yeah. And so we did it for, 3 months, intensively, whole season, till the 15th, when the numbers went up and the UK locked us from being acceptable country with the numbers, and the season ended. But it was a good season. We were the only one having season. You remember Greeks having problems, huge controls and everything, and you were able to. And due to our inputs, people were able to come from all over the world, including America. That was the biggest fun.
Yeah. And then we had ABC News contact us.
They contacted you, and then we went together to Dubrovnik.
Yeah, and then you took them around for 6 days, and then we had 4 reports on
live
ABC
from
News,
Dubrovnik.
Good Morning America, 12.5 million people, amazing.
Yeah, we were. Well, that was a great story. And Americans were flying in.
Yeah, they were.
And actually, we created a diplomatic problem. You remember when we had the ABC, then the news broke out America, and then all of a sudden EU asked, how come that Americans can come to you and not to, oh, you're not in Schengen. Okay, we are changing the rules. Americans are not allowed. So there was a lot of messy times.
But it was, I think the fact that Croatia was open for Americans at the same time as the digital nomad visa was the same. It was the same.
That was just 2 years.
And those two things that really
helped a lot.
Massive. I think that's probably things that really helped Croatia, get the American tourism. It really made a difference back then.
And actually, we did it for no money. We paid. We had the Viber chat bot answering all these questions because it's very easy. It was like you could easily program because asking questions: Are you European? Are you Americans? Anybody third? Then there are a set of instructions for everybody. And
it was. I mean, for me, it was probably the best educational experience of my time in Croatia. But man, you were relentless.
No, the
2-3 o'clock in the morning, message from Matt, son, do this. You're just crazy.
Oh, when I was adjusting the landing page and frequently asked questions, because it was helping us not to repeat, because that people cannot understand that. So we had like 200,000 hits on a web page. Yeah. Can you imagine if all those people called us? Yeah. Who would, there were all, 5, probably 6 of us doing it all the time for nothing, for free. But I was very grateful that I know that, that I applied for the PR Oscars with that. So 3 independent juries selected this as a, nominees. Yeah. And I didn't send the latest material, so I was never judged. But the colleagues that know the experience, they say if 3 selected juries, it's already winning because the 3 different juries selected you as a good story from Corona, a PR story. Then you must have won it already. But I made that mistake. So it was a lesson to learn. A lot of lessons learned that summer. But I think we brought a lot of tourists and brought a lot of money to Croatia. This is what if you ask me 2020 to 95, and we mentioned it was that patriotic thing that when you do. So I didn't ask in 2020, like I didn't ask before, is this, am I going to make any money out of it or any interest? No, we were doing good thing for Croatia because it was a good year for me. We had a business, something happened, we moved online, whatever. But it was a bad year for many doing private accommodation. You remember when we were teaching people, do the last minute, don't pay booking 15%, reduce the price, and go to the direct booking and stuff like that. So, even some educational stuff that you would expect anybody else, somebody else who is paid to do it, and they didn't. Yeah. And I have to point now to one thing that is very actual now. Go to that old article about land-free tourism apartment country. When it was years. It was 2017 probably. Yeah. When you didn't realize what I wrote, what I was writing about. Yeah. Take it out of the folder compared to what people are talking today.
Because now it's becoming a big topic.
It's a big topic, but what years later when it's too late?
Yeah. So a few years ago, you became the communications director for the current Prime Minister, Andrej Plenković.
Yeah, I was in 2003 for Racan, advisor. Yeah. And what was just to tell why it is thrilling. And what I sometimes say it's, okay, different kind of businesses, jobs can, excite you or whatever. But when I started working with Racan, somebody from the television, one of the managers said, "Oh, Macan, you're flying high." I said, "What?" "You're going to Rijeka tomorrow," because they got the protocol I didn't get. It was Pope John Paul II visiting Croatia, and Prime Minister was going to greet him at the end of the tour in Rijeka. And I didn't know that I was on the plane. So you get up on Challenger, you fly to Kirk, you get on the police boat, they take you to Rijeka, thousands of people. I'm behind Prime Minister talk to this one, talk to Cheer, just trying to make him closer to the people or whatever. And then I thought it was that. And then it was a hot day, they didn't have hats, I was bringing water, stuff, saving them, but it was live, so you couldn't do it. So we were rolling bottles like that. I'm from doing everything to that. And then you get this as a reward. At the end of the day, they simply Pope will receive you. I said, what? Not whole delegation, we're being with the Prime Minister, the wife and the Prime Minister, they go first. After, when we call you, you go all together. And then we got all these medals and we joined to kiss the hand of Pope. You got a picture with the Pope. So, this is not business as usual. Yeah. And this is what you do when you are advisor to the Prime Minister. And we did a lot of things. I did the opening of the highways for that government when we opened the Gornja Ploča Zadar, the first stretch through the Velebit, through the Sveti Rok, And so it was a great show, and we organized a huge concert in Zadar. But it was amidst Gotovina crisis.
Right.
And so I asked politicians to leave Zadar. So I think nobody else would do it but me.
Right.
I simply, the president came, message, Racan, we opened the highways, we did all the show. And then the president asked, what are we doing? We said, going home, Zagreb.
Nice.
And they did it because otherwise we would have such security and no people celebration in Zadar. So you had more than 50,000 people celebrating in Zadar. So that was in 2003. In 2018, and why I joined actually, because working at television, I realized they are doing good things, and I could interpret them and say this is good things. And then I said, why don't you do it differently? Okay, just one anecdote with Russian. Before I started working, he told me like the government sessions are on Thursday, and I was Saturday. I think it was Saturday, and he told me, we are going to abolish visas for Serbians. So citizens of Serbia, 2003. And, there was, right was very strong on the left government attacking, you're not defending Croatian interests, whatever. I said, okay, because normalization was already going, nobody actually, they talked much about it, but actually nobody cared. And I said, okay. And then he said, but we are abolishing the visas. I said, okay, abolish them. And then he repeated and looked at me and said, but did you hear me what I said? I said, yes, this business as usual. Because he was so much stressed with these critics from the opposition that he wasn't sure whether. So I said, okay, make sure I'm going to leak it to the Croatian television because I was still there. So I told them and said, we are abolishing visas for citizens of Serbia. They didn't react, same as I did.
Right.
And then I told them, I called them on Monday. I said, but this is big news.
Yeah.
You have to break it. And actually, they broke it. And there was one extreme right HSP party reacted on Wednesday. Visas were abolished on Thursday, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes this is part of our job that we simply kill that perception, or we see through the facts, or we create the perception. But it was they needed help. It's obvious that needed. This something similar happened with Plenković, that actually since 2015 I was often on the TV analyzing elections, mostly for RTL and anything that is politically relevant. So obviously I'm able to read in between lines, and I remember that one very important person there, high position administration person in the government. I met her by chance in the street close to the government when I was negotiating a job, and she said, "You know what I have to tell you? You, like if you were sitting with us in our rooms, you are interpreting the things like if you knew everything what we were discussing there."
Okay, right.
So somehow I see, and it's always that to me it's really Croatia first, and because I was seeing that Karamarko moved Croatian agents at quite extreme right, that created most in the middle bridge, and Plenković was going backwards, coming back to the center, and what I heard sounded okay, and actually Plenković kind of my generation, because there is the only joke that, actually I think he told me that, but years ago, he was one of the youngest heads of the sectors in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I was the youngest.
Oh.
See, usually in his career, he was the first ever,
right.
But I was the youngest ever in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He said, "That's the only thing I cannot beat you," because I think I'm older 2 months like him.
Okay.
Right. So this is generation Kolinda, Milanović. We are roughly 1 year up and down. Because my last position in the government was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like head of information department, taking care of the embassies, current news for the embassies. And so we knew each other from before. We had a good relationship, and I actually refused first offer because I said, it's better that I keep this way, and I didn't feel like I had some health problems before, and I said more stress wouldn't help. But he's a very good negotiator. He doesn't take no for an answer, so he managed to do it to make it work for him, not necessarily for me, but that's at the end why I left, because it wasn't as we agreed.
Right.
And it worked. It worked fine, though I became kind of there was the Istanbul Convention things, a lot of conservative movement like in Poland coming here and kind of we stopped all that, and government stayed and everything, and I became picado, I think, dart target for many, because they consider me lefty.
Right.
Because I'm in the center. I would always say that. I would say that I'm Croatian liberal, brought up conservative. But I'm liberal. But I still think that I'm not nationalist if I'm patriot. If I put Croatia first. The problem is that they were foreigners, and all those not liking Croatia were putting you as a nationalist if you put Croatia first. But that's in US it's patriotism. So yes, and they never say that it's a nationalism in the US. But when that depends on what circumstances you are in. Are you a small country like Croatia was? Because, for example, nobody's questioning Slavo-Ukraini today, though. It has very conservative. It was very controversial. It's as controversial as Zadon's Fremni.
It's a similar thing, isn't it?
Similar thing. But actually, but world circumstances changed, and that didn't matter because it was the same. It's a Russian, Serbian, Ukraine, Croatia. It's the same scenario. But we were not existing as a country at the time, so we had to prove ourselves to be the best in the world. So we have like one of the best minority laws. So the minorities have 8 MPs. I think many countries have so many MPs and stuff like that. But this is making us, I think, better place to live.
We started in 91. We're now in 2023. How do you feel about Croatia today, and are you hopeful for the future?
Yes, but the question is, who are we going to leave this Croatia to?
Okay.
So it's, I think if you ask somebody like 30 years ago, it was Croatia forever and Croats forever. Now I think it'll be Croatia forever, but I'm not sure about Croats forever because EU opened that enormous potential of going abroad. And so you were not supposed to beg anymore for a job in Croatia, somebody in politics or somewhere. And so it opened the market. It's a free movement on people and goods, and people moved. So mostly from Slavonia first, and then everybody moved. And Croatia are better than average educated, I would say, because we speak all these foreign languages. I think this is what you usually talk about Croatia. It's more than average because we subtitle everything, so we listen. We are exposed to that foreign languages all the time. So
my kids speak English at school to the
others. That's normal. That's a norm. So actually, our people, I think, were they're good workers and very adaptable to the working abroad. And there is traditional working abroad here, but with EU it became big thing. And so Croatia losing people, Croatia is losing kids, and there are a lot of foreign workers coming in. So this is going to make a change long term. So it will be completely different Croatia, but still Croatia. But
do you see that as a healthy thing though, with all these foreign workers coming in?
Because we'll open more to different cultures and everything, but we'll have also to accept different things. So Croatia, I'm not sure whether Croatia is ready for any ghettoed areas like we have in Germany or whatever, where you have only Muslims, or where Croatians are used to live mixed and everywhere, respecting each other. But so this could be a shock when you got to quarter or to part where there are only foreign workers, whatever. This is going to be cultural change when it happens, if it happens, or they'll be more immersed with everybody. We'll see. But Croatia is beautifully positioned, so I think it's going to be a big challenge. Everybody is going to have some property here or stay here for holidays, but not throughout the year. So it's going to be a challenge. What is going to be 365 Croatia? And we know what's the summer, as long as we have the sea and stuff, clean sea, whatever. But what's an average Croatia? We proved that we can do great things like Rimac and the others. And that we can be top in the world in sports with such small. Because they say that one of the reasons why we are so good that since there is much competition here. So you always play against the best. So Hajduk always plays against Dinamo. In the bigger countries, it takes you much more time till you play against the best. So the talents here, if they are talents, they can grow quickly and they can show themselves. So it's a still great potential. We have to find that balance between tourism and real estate and other industries, because we cannot live only on tourism, and we cannot live on that latest resource that we have, because we are already close to using it to the limit, the space.
Yeah.
So if everyone builds house on the sea, we cannot afford that, and it won't be that nice.
Yeah, and also it's getting hotter, so it's
yeah. That's going to be a challenge for Dubrovnik. The sea goes up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. It was a pleasure having you on, and it was a really good overview of the last 30 years.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You still didn't explain me why I'm an asshole at the beginning. Why I was an asshole at the beginning.
Why you're an asshole? No, I didn't say at the beginning. I said that Viber community. I didn't really. I mean, I was just saying it would be nice to have something, and then you had a vision. We can do this, and I think at the beginning you knew that you were going to win all these PR awards because you'd actually.
No, I didn't.
Really? Okay. And
no, nearly not. You know how I applied for the award? Overnight, or before the deadline.
I just remember it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. There'd be just like message, and then 4 o'clock. I mean, do you ever sleep?
Now yes, but in those times not. It was exciting.
There was one time we went to Istria, and we were in this hotel, and you said you'd send me something. I went to bed at midnight. There was messages, like 4 emails just after midnight. There were another 3 emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. There was another at 3:30 in the morning, another at 5. And then you were down at breakfast at 6 in the morning and like calling me saying, "Where the hell are you?" And I was just like, how do you function like that? It was amazing.
That was time when I was younger and full of energy, and I wanted to conquer everything or do everything. Yeah. So we managed, and it shows up at the end. It shows at the end in results.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to slow now, though.
Yeah, excellent. And you're off olive picking next week, are you?
Hopefully that I'll go to Israel, because I'm go there traditionally to Cavalons, and the olive harvest is a bit late, and I have this week free, and next week I might even. I'll see.
Excellent. All right. Well, maybe see you there.
See you there then.
All right. Thanks a lot. Next week we'll have somebody else quite interesting. Thanks for watching.